now getting into the overview of the March Madness tournament that was just updated. We had a wild week of conference tournament games that resulted in a handful of bid-stealing teams and some surprises that were left out. But we are going to be starting by talking about the teams that did make the tournament. Looking at the top 8 seeds that were ranked, we had UConn being the number 1 overall seed, followed by Houston, Purdue. Those were the 3 sort of no-brainer first number 1 seeds. And then North Carolina did grab the final remaining number 1 seed available, followed by Tennessee, Arizona, Marquette, and Iowa State as the 2 seeds. Iowa State being the number 8 overall was probably one of the bigger surprises when it came to the seeding of the tournament, considering the fact that they just beat down on some very good teams in Baylor and Houston in the Big 12 tournament, won by a combined score of 42 versus both of those teams, and now they are the 8th overall team. They probably had a better case in my eyes to being the last remaining 1 seed, but instead they are number 8. Again, ultimately this only results in them being a 2 seed, so it's not the end of the world for them, but definitely came as a big time surprise here. KenPom has them rated as the highest number 2 seed, so by those metrics closer to the 1 seed than where they are. Backs up the eye test, but ultimately the committee decided what they did, and this is the results of it. And because of that, getting into the regions here, it leads to an absolutely stacked Eastern region where you have UConn as the number 1 overall seed. They play closest to home, and they get rewarded with a little bit of a gauntlet of a region here where, along with UConn, who won the Big East tournament, there are also the winners of the SEC tournament, Big 12 tournament, and Big 10 in Auburn, Iowa State, and Illinois. It has also 3 of the 4 teams that were in the Final Four last season. Now, of course, different year does not mean it is the exact same team, but along with UConn, there is also San Diego State and Florida Atlantic that are going to be in this region as well. Not to mention that BYU as a 6 seed is pretty scary. They are 12th in the country in net rating, so another very dangerous team there as well. In terms of KenPom rankings, the East has the top ranked 1, 2, 3, 4, and 8 seeds in the conference. So at the top of the rankings here, there is nothing but talent in the Eastern region. Because of all of this, I think it is probably going to be the most chalked region in terms of seeing any kinds of big time upsets. There are some smaller ones, Northwestern versus FAU as the 9 versus 8. I think that Northwestern will win this game, although they are dealing with an injury to one of their big guys that could prove to be fatal for them as well. There is also a 7-10 matchup between Washington State and Drake that should be interesting, where Washington State, the 7 seed, is actually underdogs according to ESPN Bet in this matchup. Drake is currently favored by 1.5 points in this one. So I like Washington State. I think that Jalen Wells has been a really fun watch this season as well. But I do think that it makes sense. Drake has emerged as one of these top tier mid-major teams making the tournament for at least the second year in a row. And they have one of the leading scorers in the nation in Tucker DeVries, who is scoring 21.8 points per game. So again, Drake is actually favored in this specific matchup, but Other than that, I do think that you have a lot of teams here. 11-seeded Duquesne, who is probably the most overseeded team in this tournament. A lot of people are saying that the selection committee essentially just thought that this was going to be VCU coming out of that conference. Duquesne ends up winning. They just slotted them into the 11. And I don't know, maybe this is one of those upsets that absolutely nobody sees coming, but it does seem pretty unlikely that they would be the upset here. You also have a 13th seeded Yale that was not really, they're a good team, don't get me wrong, but they sort of caught a break when Princeton got beat up on by Brown in the semifinals. They end up battling with Brown down to the final seconds where they win on a buzzer beater. So credit to the Bulldogs there. I think that, again, when you're looking at the top of this region, though, there's just too much talent, and finding the upsets there are going to be tough. UConn are currently the favorites to win it all. They're being picked in over 26% of ESPN's brackets up to this point. So they should be in a good position to at least make it to the Sweet 16. They have Stetson round 1, the winner of Northwestern and FAU in round 2. But from there, things are going to get chippy in that region and should be a great watch. Moving on to the West here, this is UNC as the number 1 seed. I think that this region is one of the most open ones that there is. Between a couple teams that were slightly over or underseeded, there is a pretty good chance for some matchups in this one. You have a 5-12 game in St. Mary's and Grand Canyon. That should be a really good matchup. I think this is going to be a very popular upset pick. I actually do like St. Mary's a lot this year, but Grand Canyon is also the top-ranked 12 seed in terms of both KenPom and net rating. So that should be a good game, I think, as a whole. Charleston is another team where they flew a little bit under the radar. We talked about this on the show last week, where they were a very popular upset pick last season, and now here they are in a similar position. They win 27 games, and they're going to be matching up against an Alabama team that does struggle on the defensive side of the ball. Now, the Cougars aren't much better, if at all, on defense, so this could be a high-scoring matchup. I think I'm taking Bama in this one, but I do think that this could be in the realm of a potential upset. New Mexico is another double-digit seeded team that should have a lot of value. Clemson got a little bit of the short end of the stick matching up against New Mexico in this one, where it's interesting because New Mexico could have been left out of the tournament as a whole. They had to win their conference tournament in the Mountain West, and they did so, but this is a better team, I believe, than just being a bubble team that ended up winning their conference. I do think that there is real value with them. They're in the 20s in terms of net rating, for whatever that means. And Clemson's a good program too, but this is a tough matchup for them in the first round. I do want to briefly just touch on the idea of this Mountain West Conference and sort of the pressure that they are under in this year's tournament, where they had a record 6 teams being selected in the cut of the 68. Now, Colorado State and Boise State are both part of the last 4 in. They'll be playing, I believe they're matched up Tuesday and Wednesday to play their games to get in, but still a big deal for the conference, and it does feel like they are going to have this spotlight on them because we haven't seen the Mountain West perform well in the NCAA tournament in years past, but last year we did have San Diego State roll off into that Final Four appearance, and maybe we have a little bit of an updated precedent in this one, but in order for that to be the case, we have to see that happen consistently. So this is the year with their most amount of teams in the dance here that maybe they can overcome that reputation that they've had in the past. I do think that Dayton was a little bit overseeded as a 7 seed. I'm just not a real believer in the Flyers this year, and I do think that that could be an upset waiting to happen. They are scheduled to go up against Nevada in the first round here. Out of this region, the number one thing that I am rooting for is to see UNC and Arizona potentially match up. The 1 and 2 seeds in the group here, where they could be meeting in the Elite 8, and we could see Caleb Love with Arizona have a chance to go up against his former team in the Tar Heels, the team that he went to the national championship game with a couple seasons ago. Now a member of a new team, and the two of them squaring off for a chance to go to the Final Four. I think that that would be cinema. So I am very much hoping for that to happen. We'll see what college basketball gods have planned for us in that department. Next on, we have the South here. This is Houston's region. For a defense and rebounding team that Houston is known for, I do think that there is a tough matchup that could be waiting for them in the round of 32 if Texas A&M is able to beat Nebraska. That's a team that has some size. They have the scoring that's been coming from Wade Taylor IV as of late. So that could definitely be interesting. Houston looking to rebound after losing by 28 points to Iowa State in the Big 12 championship game. That at least came as a surprise to me. I think that it did for most people, and now they're looking for a little bit of vengeance. But this is a matchup in A&M, assuming, again, that the Aggies are able to come out of the round of 64. Just something to look at there, I feel like, with Houston. In this region, we also have Wisconsin and James Madison, a 5-12 matchup that does really scream upset. James Madison started off extremely hot in the beginning of the year, found their way into the top 25, fell out of that, but as a 12 seed does seem to be a bit underseeded here, and a Wisconsin team that lost. I'm just not a big fan of the Big Ten as a whole, really, and to have double-digit losses in the Big Ten, I think that that is going to be a popular pick, and I'm probably going to be picking that one as well. Interestingly enough, in this region as well, we have the ACC champions and the bid stealer of NC State coming in as an 11 seed. This, I don't have the statistics on. It feels like it has to be one of the lowest seedings for a Power 5 champion in recent history, but they were the second team to ever pull off the 5 games and 5-day run and end up winning the ACC. So just for the storyline here, I am rooting for NC State a little bit. DJ Burns has really won over the nation, the electric big man from NC State. So we will see how far that run can go. They have Texas Tech in the first round, who is a good program. If they can get through to that, I do feel like Kentucky could potentially be a winnable game for them there. But again, that's sort of asking a lot there. We also have a 7-10 matchup here, Florida, and we will find out who they'll be playing after the Boise State-Colorado game. But I would be keeping an eye open if Colorado finds their way into this position. They've been red hot down the stretch of the season and could definitely put together a run. Closing out the first segment here, talking about the Midwest. This is Purdue's region. Purdue, of course, the team that is probably under the most individual pressure in the tournament after 3 straight losses to double-digit seeds. There is a lot of room for upsets in this conference. I think that Gonzaga and McNeese State is a potential matchup there. McNeese State winning 30 games. Gonzaga did all this work after a slow start in the year to pull themselves together, but this is a tough matchup here with McNeese State. I also feel maybe even a little bit better in Samford versus Kansas, where Kansas has been dealing with injuries to Kevin McCullough Jr. down the stretch of the season. Hunter Dickinson also missed the Big 12 tournament, probably more so for a precautionary reason, but is something to just consider. And as we saw with Kansas really all season and was reaffirmed in the Big 12 tournament, is they really just don't have the depth to carry themselves through, I don't think, enough of this tournament. Now, same can be said for a couple other teams in the tournament as well, but I do feel like a Samford team that is very hard-nosed, sends the full court press at you as much as they can. I do think that this is a big time spot for an upset. Also intrigued to see what happens with Oregon as an 11 seed, another team that was a bid stealer going on the run to win the Pac-12. Probably would not have been in the tournament if not for that. Is an interesting team there. And then there is Creighton and Tennessee, who are two real contenders in terms of March Madness as a whole, and could be very interesting here. Purdue is, like I mentioned, under a ton of spotlight and pressure, which is something we will be getting more into in the second segment, where we talk about some of the best storylines coming up in March Madness, as well as some potential dark horse teams. So we will be getting into all of that on the other side of the break. Stick with us and we will be right back.